Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Hey, thanks for coming. It's really exciting to be here with all of you guys. It seems like it's been a while since we've been in a room together, and so welcome. Thank you for coming. Thanks to anybody that's joining us on the stream. And for those of you that know me, know that I can talk about the legislative process and politics for a couple hours before I even have to think about what I want to say next. So the challenge today really is to be quite brief and get us back on schedule. So I really would want to give you guys do three things. Give you a really quick overview of what happened during the past legislative session, something that we try to do every time we get together in the summer. Talk a little bit about what's coming up, and then talk a little bit about how you can get involved. And then I'll be around all day if anybody has any questions, wants to get more information, or we can set up some time to talk later. But I'll be here. So thank you very much. So let me just start by saying that the 2022 legislative session ended in the end of May. We went into this year with a pretty big surplus. Nobody was really sure, what was going to happen to the economy when we went into the pandemic, but the Minnesota state budget actually did quite well, and we came into the legislature with a huge surplus. And really, the goal of that session in 22 was to try to figure out what to do with that surplus. And without going into a lot of detail or getting really politically wonky on you, you can imagine that there was a lot of fighting over what to do with that money. A lot of folks thought that we should take that money and invest it into programs and to help folks that have been hurt by the pandemic. Other folks thought, well, we should give it all back to the taxpayer, and they spent most of the session sort of fighting about that. Minnesota has a Senate, it has a House, and it has a governor. The House and the governor are controlled by the Democrats, the Senate is controlled by the Republicans, and they have very different ideas about what should be done. And so they went about passing their different bills as the legislative session went on. And about a week before it was supposed to end, they announced that they had come to an agreement. And they decided that they were going to take this $12 billion surplus and divide it up into three pots. They were going to take $4 billion and set it aside for a rainy day. They were going to take $4 billion and give it back to the taxpayers. And they were going to take $4 billion and invest it in programs and supports and services. Again, I don't have time to go into a lot of detail, but as many of you know, the state legislature is the one that sets the budget for programs and supports and services that support people with brain injury. And we spend a whole lot of our time and effort trying to influence that and to be pushing those things forward. So we were quite excited as those bills moved forward because they came to this compromise, and we had alive in the House Health and Human Services bill an effort we've been working on for more than a decade to try to improve the medical assistance, which is also known as MA or Medicaid, it's the same thing, income and asset standards, so that people would have to be so poor and could actually have jobs, could actually earn a little bit of money, could have some money in the bank and still qualify for MA. So I don't have time to dive into the ins and outs of MA here today, we'll never get out of here. But we were very excited that we were finally going to maybe have a chance to see some progress on that. But at any rate, you probably forgot about it by now. It's summer and people move on with their lives. But the legislative session basically crashed and burned, and they did not pass a bill. They did not come to an agreement on it. That $12 billion is still sitting in a pile. Well, not literally, but it's still sitting there. And essentially, we're going to have to wait until the legislature comes back next year to decide what's going to happen with that. Nobody knows. It's a projected surplus, by the way. I should be clear when I say that money's sitting in a pile. It's not actually sitting in a pile, but it's projected to be available to the next legislature. We worked really hard on that, so we were really, really disappointed when that didn't pass. We also had a bill that was going to, in the transportation area, that was going to train Metro Transit drivers on how to help people with physical disabilities get on and off the bus. That fell victim to this. And of course, I don't even have time to go into the other issues that we work on related to affordable housing, improving transportation services, employment services. But at any rate, so all of that basically sort of crashed and burned, and now what do we do next? So that's sort of what we're facing right now. And so just a couple of things to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. As you all probably know, it's getting a little dangerous to watch TV. The political ads are getting kind of thick. 2022 is an election year. And so we're going to see a primary coming up on August 9th and a general election coming up on November 8th. Now, if you have any questions about who's running for office, where you vote, how you register to vote, come and see me, talk to me. We can look it up on my phone today. You can get in touch and join join us in our group of advocates, and we can help you get plugged into that. But we're at a point right now, because of the way that the census, they take the census every 10 years. Everybody's heard of the census, right? And then at the end of when they take the census, they do what's called redistricting, because they want to make sure that as the population changes, they want to make sure all the districts are roughly about the same size. And so the district and the representative that you voted for last time may not even be on your ballot this time. You could be in a new area. And so we can help you figure that out. But the long and the short of it is the House is up for election, the Senate is up for election, and the governor is up for election. And that's sort of a quirk of redistricting that happens every 20 years. So, so we're in that sort of mother of all elections phase. And I think that had a lot to do with why the legislature crashed and burned. But at any rate, I'm not going to get up here and give you all my political views today. But at any rate, those elections are coming up, and they are really, really important. We're never going to tell you who to vote for, which party's better, but we are going to tell you to find out what you care about and to vote for the candidates that reflect your values. And it's really hard and challenging to try to figure that out, and we're here to help make that happen. And especially during the time when all these offices are up for re-election, it's so important to get yourself sort of educated and help figure that out. And you know, I know it's easy to get sort of disgusted with politics, but I really want to be clear that the people that we elect in the primary in August are going to be the people who are on the ballot in November. The people who are on the ballot in November and they win their election are going to come to the legislature in January. The legislature that shows up in January, one of their main jobs is going to be to set the budget for the next 2 years that starts on July 1st, 2023. That will go for 2 years. That will go to June 30th, 2025. So if you care about anything that has to do with programs and services and supports, housing, transportation, healthcare, that has anything to do with the Minnesota state budget through the end of June 2025, you should be paying attention to who's on that ballot right now, because those are the people that are going to make those decisions. Don't mean to get preachy here, but it's really, really important that we get the people in office who support us and reflect those values. So what can you do? Well, you can join us. You can become part of our Citizen Advocate Academy. We have a group of folks that get together. We've obviously, with the pandemic, we haven't been doing it in person. We got a purple shirt right here in the front row with Patsy. We have been down at the Capitol every Tuesday. Now we do it virtually. During the session, we have training sessions. We have what we call a Citizen Advocate Academy. We're going to be holding candidate forums. We've got 4 of them planned for this fall, where we're actually inviting candidates to come. And if you live in those districts, you'll get a postcard from us. And if you're in our database and you live in those districts, you'll get a postcard from us inviting you to come join and learn about how the candidates stand on those issues. And then we also do our training session. It really is about how do we make sure that the legislature and the people making decisions about Minnesota's budget understand the impact that those decisions have on people with brain injury. Because let's face it, how many of you guys knew much about brain injury before you had one? Or before a loved one had one, right? Most people don't. And so it's really up to us to do that. And with all the redistricting, with all the politics, with all the elections, there's 201 legislators and 1 governor all up for election this year. And we're guessing there's probably going to be a minimum of 75 brand new legislators come January. And we don't know how many of them know how much about brain injury. So at any rate, that's my pitch. Become a citizen advocate, tell your story, participate in the political process. Let me know if you'd like to become a citizen advocate. You can come to our Citizen Advocate Academy. You can come to our Tuesdays at the Capitol, whether they're Zoom Tuesdays at the Capitol or Tuesdays actually at the Capitol. We don't know yet, but we will let you know how you can participate, because my guess is we're going to do both. If you'd like to do candidate forums, we're going to do that. If you'd like to learn how a bill becomes a law, we can do that. If you've got an issue that you care about, that you're passionate about, and you want to know how you can make a difference on that issue, we can do that as well. So I'm really excited, as always, to be here, and wish I had hours to tell stories and talk about this stuff. Even though you guys are all sleeping, I would be having fun myself, and so I would enjoy it. But at any rate, thank you so much for the time here today. And please come and talk to me. Please join us as we move forward. So in the interest of getting things on time, I went 5 minutes into our next speaker, so I will stop there and welcome Stephanie Henigin to come on up. And Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to introduce yourself. Absolutely. We can take it from there. So I'm around for the whole day. Come and talk to me if you want to talk politics. If you want to run from politics, that's fine. I won't hunt you down. But please let me know. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, well, I am Stephanie Henigin. I'm a speech language pathologist at Regents Hospital. I work in the outpatient clinic at the Neuroscience Center, but I also do on occasion work inpatient as well at the hospital. I have been a speech pathologist since 2014. Seems like a long time for me now, but and I am just so grateful that the Brain Injury Alliance asked me to be here today to speak with all of you. Today I'm going to be talking about the power of support groups and the benefits and considerations for creating or joining a stroke or brain injury support group. I also am the co-facilitator of our Neuroscience Center Brain Injury Support Group as well. So that's a little bit about me. I just like to disclose that I am a Regents Hospital employee, and I do have professional memberships with the National Speech Language Association in the Minnesota State. So with our presentation today, I'm hoping that you all will kind of take away a few key pieces of this. I want you to learn about the emotional journey, as you all know, the emotional journey with grief and acceptance after a brain injury. We're going to talk about describing the benefits of attending a peer-supported communication or peer community support group, either if you are a person with a brain injury or a family member or caregiver. We're going to understand the process and considerations for creating a new support group, if that is speaking to any of your hearts, if this really empowers you to create that safe format for these people. And then we're just going to understand how we continue and can grow a support group. So as we know, the journey of a brain injury is quite complex. One brain injury survivor, she says, a brain injury is the hardest journey anyone can encounter. It means you have to learn to live as someone different. I miss the old me, but try every day to embrace the new me. I don't know who Deborah is, but this quote really just hit my heart. I also I don't know if anyone's ever seen this picture where you have all of these different emotions of grief, but I like the picture on the right because it really defines for me what it's like to be a family member survivor of a brain injury. Those emotions are all over the place. I don't know if any of you have heard of Carol Starr. I brought her book with me, To Root and to Rise. I have no connection with this book, no financial connections with this book. I just find it very powerful and I use it a lot in my therapy and group sessions. Carol, she sustained a brain injury after a car accident in 1999. Her brain injury did not allow her to return to work. She was a teacher and an amateur musician. But now she's an award-winning author, and she has this brain injury workbook, and it does a very, very wonderful job of laying it out and all of those emotions. And there's also little workbook pieces too to help you reflect through your journey as well. So this book is kind of inspiring parts of my presentation today. So Carol, she identified this experience of a brain injury as a spiral journey, and that's through her acceptance of the different stages of the brain injury. Many of these stages are revolving, meaning that you're going to experience these emotions many times. It's not just one and done. And there can also be different triggers in life that cause you to kind of go through this spiral journey of brain injury. And these stages, they can be experienced by the person with the brain injury, but also from the family members and the caregivers and the friends. So it's also very important to acknowledge that it's everyone who is connected to that person can be impacted. So, I don't know about you, but I've experienced stage 1, denial of the brain injury and the symptoms. This is typically the first stage, the first emotion of those survivors from a brain injury and the family members. In this stage, the person's main goal is to achieve a total recovery to that normal self, whatever that normal self means to that person. Anything less than a total recovery is perceived as unacceptable or unfavorable to that person with a brain injury or their family members. can serve as a protective mechanism for the brain initially, but staying in this space long term is not a healthy or long term solution. There is no expected time frame to get through this stage, and this stage, like I said, will revolve. I know I've gone through it many times myself, but this is a normal emotional part of the journey, and having these recurrent thoughts, they might include like, no, this can't be real, or if I just push myself hard enough, I will get back to my normal self. I've also heard a lot of my patients say these phrases as well. The next stage is that sensation of loss and confusion. So that person may feel just, they don't know what's going on, they don't associate with themselves anymore in a sense, they just don't know who this person is anymore. The brain injury symptoms continue, and the person with the brain injury may seem to be not get better by their definition of getting better. And the strategy sometimes is to just push through it, but that doesn't actually work. It actually makes those brain injury symptoms worse. And we do talk a lot about that in therapy with my patients too, is just really being mindful of how your body is responding and what are your symptoms of brain injury and how can you recognize that to kind of take some steps back to help you be more successful instead of pushing so far you can't recover for that day. The person's sense of self may begin to crumble as they observe certain failures. And those failures could accumulate within their work life, in their home life, in their community. And the person may share feelings like, nothing is easy anymore. Everything is a challenge. Or they may say, a piece of me has died with this brain injury. Stage 3 that Carol talks about is that sadness, that anger, and that loss of the former self. As this brain injury continues, the person may begin to realize that my old life is not coming back. This realization can cause a lot of overwhelming feelings of pain and other emotions as well. The person may be more frustrated and irritable, and this may be experienced by the family members and friends as well. They don't understand why their loved one is feeling so frustrated, but usually it's related to this stage of the journey. People may start to have more what I call negative self-talk, statements like, I'm not strong enough to fix for this, or I'm nothing anymore and I just want my old self back. Carol really speaks in her book about this idea of that continued comparison of the former self. And she talks about, I'll quote her, she said, it's not fair to compare my new self to who I used to be, or compare my brain injury to other people's brain injuries. Both types of these comparisons only set me up for extra grief and extra feelings of inferiority. I don't know if anyone here, you don't have to raise your hand, but that comparison game definitely does make it harder to get through the brain injury journey because there are a lot of really good things to celebrate about yourself, and sometimes we focus so much more on, well, I can't do this, well, I can't do that. But if she would have stuck in that mindset, she wouldn't have created this inspired book and found all these beautiful things that she can do. So she really did empower herself, but I do understand that it does take a long time to get there too, for family members and people who are survivors of brain injuries. So that kind of segues into this next stage of advancing towards the acceptance. As the person with a brain injury begins to get to know this new version of themselves, they will continue to have those brief moments of grief. That's perfectly normal. During this stage, the brain injury survivor will start to identify their strengths and how they're actually really resilient. They may have some realizations such as, life has a different plan for me, or these losses have opened new doors that I wouldn't have known before. I like this quote from another brain injury survivor. It says, "I want to make a difference and give people the will to fight. I want to show the world that having a TBI is not a death sentence. That as long as you have hope, faith, and a will to fight, nothing can stop you." Acceptance. This idea of acceptance is acknowledging that a brain injury really happened. The idea of acceptance does not mean that it happens one time and it's done. Acceptance happens multiple times. Instead, I just said that, we're good. I'm summarizing my own slides. So what I like about this picture is you see, I don't know if you can see, but there's two rain clouds. What is acceptance? So acceptance is just saying, yep, it's raining, or yep, I had a brain injury. What acceptance is not, is it's not saying, well, I don't like the rain, I wish it wasn't raining, or I wish I didn't have a brain injury, things like that. So acceptance is just, yep, this is what it is. The idea of acceptance does not mean that the survivor of a brain injury is giving up. They're not giving up on healing or working towards their new self. Acceptance is just focusing on what can be done and using those strategies that they've learned with their therapists or their family members, and not saying something cannot be done just because it's a little bit different than what they're used to. Nan S. Russell, she reminds us that there are many ways to accomplish the same goals and many right answers to the same problems. So I don't know about you, but in my therapy sessions, we talk about how this person wants to do it exactly how they used to do it, but now because of their brain injury, it's harder for them to accomplish that. So we talk about how we can accomplish the exact same goal. We might just have to use a strategy to work around it, but the task still gets done. And that can take some time and flexibility to be open to that idea, but there are many ways to still accomplish the same goal. It can be challenging for survivors who get stuck in only wanting to do that goal the same way as their old self used to do. So I just challenge everyone to kind of be open to new ideas and approaches. So family members can help survivors still do things, maybe just a little bit differently. Speaking of family members and care partners, the brain injury does not only impact that person who had the injury. The entire family and social and work network also is affected for that survivor. It's important to acknowledge that family members also experience this denial of their loved one. And even if that loved one passes away, there's still denial and a lot of other emotions that are involved. Talking about these feelings with a medical professional and or attending support groups can be very beneficial for everyone involved. So speaking of support groups, help fill that gap because unfortunately, as we know, therapy and insurance does have limitations. And so people feel, well, I'm not better yet. What do I do? And so that's where the support groups come in. And it helps people kind of have that bridge between the safe space of therapy and have that support into the community. Support groups can help with finding new and different perspectives, help with minimizing anxiety, feeling less alone, learning how to handle issues, knowing that someone else is there experiencing something similar with you, and learning new strategies from others. It's a very powerful space, I can tell you. So Regents Hospital, we have stroke and we have a brain injury support group. Our stroke support group was founded in 2003, and it does receive some assistance from the Minnesota Stroke Association. It was originally at the hospital, but then our beautiful new neuroscience center was built April of 2017, so then it moved over there. But since the pandemic, it has been meeting virtually, and it meets the second Thursday of the month. I think it's from 3 to 4. I'll double check on that. They just changed it, Sami, and that is led by 2 physical therapists. And then our brain injury support group was created in 2010. It was created by an outpatient speech therapist, not me, who identified that there was a need for this in our community. Again, it was at the hospital, but now it is moved over to our neuroscience center. And this group is also meeting virtually too with the pandemic. I have not been told when this group will meet back in person, just with the ongoing new life we're all experiencing with this pandemic. I do like the virtual format just because I feel like we have been able to welcome so many other people from around the state. That's been a really encouraging piece. But I do know that a lot of our group members do miss this in-person interaction. So there's definitely a balance with this new journey we're all on with this pandemic. So if you want to start your own support group, there's some things to kind of consider. We like to make sure that it's accessible, maybe not cost a lot, or free parking would be nice for group members. A lot of group members did use the bus line and things to get to our meetings. Time of day is important to consider. We do know that typically that earlier morning, afternoon time, people feel more refreshed. And that evening, nighttime, people tend to be a little more tired after a brain injury. So unfortunately, ours is more in the afternoon time, but it was just kind of what worked for the leaders' schedules. But it's very flexible, and people come if they want, and they can leave when they want virtually too. So we don't worry so much about counting heads. It's just creating that safe space. This kind of talks more about in person, so you kind of want to make sure you have a larger environment, trying to be able to control that environmental noise. We know after a brain injury, people can be more sensitive to sounds or lights. So if you can adjust those, that's very helpful. Using projectors and music can sometimes actually be more difficult for people with brain injuries. So trying to not have all of the events needing bright lights and things can be something to be mindful of. Having large fonts or visuals or giving them something to take home too can also help. Just, with a brain injury, memory can be affected as well. Communication with group members, having those flyers, emails. We send out a reminder email the week of for our group with the links. And then I also kind of follow back and send a little update about what we did talk about in a summary in case people weren't able to join, but they can still kind of get some tidbits from our groups. We also do have a private Facebook group for our group members. So that's just a safe place for the group members to talk amongst themselves in between our sessions too, if they want to reach out to their friends, because a lot of times, a lot of great friendships do blossom from our group sessions. Just kind of behind the scenes, if you wanted to create your own support group, just having an easy access to an attendance log and email addresses, keeping them in a safe place. If you do send out group emails, use that BCC, the blind carbon copies. You can keep all those emails private. Kind of brainstorming ideas and things. I always ask my group members, is there anything you really wanted to talk about? And we'll add it to the agenda. And sometimes we just have an open format too, and group members can bring up any concerns or questions they have for other group members. As the facilitator, I really try to take a step back, and my job is to really just create the space for the communication and the interaction. My job really isn't to be a therapist at that time. It's really just more for other group members to interact with each other and support each other. So it can be hard as a group facilitator too, because you're really doing this balancing act of trying to give everyone enough space and time, but also trying to kind of wheel in people who may be very long-winded or really passionate about something. So it's definitely a balancing act as a group facilitator. I like the simple ideas, so the simple keys for a support group success. The S stands for supportive, so ask caring questions, listen attentively to the answers, and just make that person feel valued, that you are giving them your time. The I stands for inspirational, so reassure others that life does get better. We all have those moments where we're in those valleys, and we all have those times when we're going up those hills. So just knowing that you're not alone is very powerful. The M stands for motivational, so encourage action and acknowledge improvements. The P is practical, so offer options and helpful tips and resources that maybe people could go seek out themselves. I know we refer to the Brain Injury Alliance a lot because they have really great resources. The L is life affirming, so avoid comparing one person's stroke or brain injury to your stroke or brain injury. Don't deny or devalue anyone else's feelings. The really important thing about a brain injury group is people are being vulnerable and validate however they're feeling. It's not a place to fix things, but it's a place for people to have that safe communication space. And the E is educational. So talk about what things have worked for you and for others. You can provide suggestions, but giving advice can be very kind of a dangerous space. So just all I can say is this worked for me. Maybe you could try it, but you'll have to figure out if it works for you. Some different meeting topics, because I know this can be a hard area to kind of find some inspiration. So you could talk about education. We've had speakers in the past, professionals come and kind of give more information to the group members. Recognition, so acknowledge group member setbacks and victories. Talk about anniversaries and their goals and just overall health changes. Socialization, so just allowing time for group members to socialize with each other. This is more of the in-person. When we had that, we did have an extra kind of minute set aside for group members to kind of get together with friends and catch up in person. So it's really hard to connect to people these days, whether that's virtually or in person. We're all really busy. Emotional support, so allow the group to become that safe space to foster that emotional support through a buddy system. So some group members really do connect with each other and they kind of check in on each other in between group sessions. And it's just nice to know they can text each other or call each other and just say, hey, I'm having a really tough day. But they're talking to someone who really understands. That's really, really powerful. An information swap, so encouraging group members to discuss different ideas that they found helpful with the brain injury journey. So last month, our group, we talked about compensatory strategies, and group members have a lot of really good ideas about different memory strategies and how do we work on word finding and working on problem solving and paying bills on time and taking medications, and it was just, that was one I could kind of step back and the whole group just kind of took over, and I thought it was pretty helpful, and I even wrote down some good ideas that I can use in therapy with others. And then we also have resource networking, so combining shared wisdom and knowledge and experiences from brain injury support, or brain injuries and stroke. So we've talked about like community outreach, like there's a lot of adaptive programs that Minnesota has for people who have brain injury. If they really want to get back into fishing, there's fishing programs that can help you get back on a boat and enjoy it in a safe space. But oftentimes people don't know about that, so it was a good use of our group time to give some people some hope again and inspiration to get back to those things that they love to do. Other ideas, again, before the pandemic, usually December we'd have like a big potluck and we just kind of all get together and share what we're grateful for, and just a time to celebrate the holidays with each other. We've also had other peers with a brain injury come and speak to our group in the past, and people have really appreciated that and felt really empowered after hearing their stories. And then we also had community networking. So the Brain Injury Alliance came to one of our groups with some state representatives, and I still hear people talking about how much they really enjoyed that opportunity to have some coaching of how to kind of bring up an idea to a state representative. And then they actually got to sit across a table during that session with these leaders, and they had active listening and got to get their passion areas heard. So that's on our list when we can do this again, Brain Injury Alliance. So other things to consider if and when you create a brain injury or support group for stroke survivors. Sometimes you could think about ages. So sometimes there are a lot of younger people who have brain injuries, and they might find more power of being together with same age peers versus if you have a large group of young to old. So just something to kind of consider, because maybe younger generations have different things they want to discuss and talk about versus older generations. Having an aphasia or a word finding communication support group could be beneficial for people. Having a separate group just for caregivers. Being a caregiver is very difficult. So having a safe space for those caregivers to bond and talk about their areas of difficulties, but also things that have worked for them could be really important as well. And then we also have our brain injury support group. So how do you grow your support group? So you talk to your therapy colleagues, your doctors, your other medical professionals. The Brain Injury Alliance has a whole list of things that can help connect people. Just word of mouth can really be helpful. Connect to other brain injury support group people. Tell them about your group and they can help spread the word as well. Because sometimes maybe Thursday afternoons doesn't work for people, but if I know that another group meets on a different day, by all means, I'm going to say, well, maybe check out this group instead. Just a raise of hands, has anyone ever attended a support group before? Okay, good, yeah. So these are just some general topics that our stroke support group has done in the past. This was actually from a couple years ago, but we kind of rotate the ideas. One time they talked about falls and preventions. They had a physical therapist come in because, with a brain injury, we're always concerned about a secondary brain injury from a fall. So just talking about ways to safely prevent that. The stroke support group really wanted to talk about estate planning, wills, and charitable giving. So they had a professional come in and give some guidance on how to get that started. Northern Clay Projects has always been a favorite of both groups. I don't know if you've ever done those before, but they come in and they bring clay and you get to create your own projects, and then they get to go get casted or in the oven of things, and then they got brought back. Sometimes just general education about a stroke and having a guest speaker can be really powerful because a lot of us don't know what it's like to have a stroke or a brain injury until you either experience one yourself or you had a loved one or a friend. And I just think the community at large needs to know more about brain injuries and support groups. Because unfortunately, they might be impacted someday with someone that they love. So I just think that's an area that everyone needs to know more about. I don't know if anyone's heard of Jennifer Fernjack, but she is a local brain injury survivor. She has come and talked at the stroke support group and the brain injury support group, and she is absolutely phenomenal, very inspiring. She also just wrote a book. Unfortunately, I don't remember the title of it, but Jennifer Fernjack, if you look it up, she also was just interviewed by Carol Levin, I think, this past year. She's phenomenal. I always love talking to her. Technology, I don't know if people use technology in their home. I do. Smart devices are my best friend to try and remember things. So that was one topic the stroke group wanted to learn more about. And then you can kind of see it kind of just, we repeated some of the topics because sometimes people don't make it to one, so they still have an opportunity to join for a different group. For our brain injury support group, Jennifer Fernjack talked about the power of gratitude and acts of kindness. We talked about just healthy living tips and the importance of moving and nutrition and cognitive engagement, brain activities. The Brain Injury Alliance, and before the pandemic, they showed the unmasking video. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but I love that video, and I love when those masks can be displayed at our facility. They really just, each person gets to create their own mask, and it shows what having a brain injury means to them. So it's a fantastic documentary. Another topic we talked about is how relationships change after a brain injury. That could be for many reasons. That could be the person with the brain injury maybe is more irritable or doesn't want to socialize as much. It also could mean family members or friends maybe distance themselves, and the people who had a brain injury just don't understand why. And so we had a really meaningful conversation discussing that. I don't know if anyone's heard of the spoon theory. It was created by a person with a brain injury, and she talked about what it's like to have a brain injury. She was at dinner with a friend, and she grabbed a bunch of spoons, and she said, "This is what it's like. I only have 12 spoons to get me through my day. And you have an unlimited number of spoons because you don't have a brain injury. And so I have to plan out my day. So maybe it takes me 4 spoons to get ready and get to work. So now I'm left with 8. And now my job takes another 4 to 5. So now I'm only left with so many at the end of the day." And it's a big challenge for people with a brain injury for that energy capacity. And so we talked about how what activities take spoons away, take energy away. And we talked about what activities maybe give that energy back. So some people talked about napping can help, or having a snack, or just short socialization with friends if that helps people. But that was a really, really powerful topic too. Grief and acceptance after a brain injury. I already talked about the compensatory strategies. Just a few months ago, we talked about celebrating you and what are the things we can celebrate. You are a person. You're not just a person with a brain injury. You have value and purpose. What can we celebrate? There are many things to celebrate. So just kind of shifting for a moment there to kind of take that brain injury piece out and still celebrate you as a wonderful human. Josie Oliva, he is also a person with a brain injury. He came and spoke to our group. He is so funny and powerful, and he is just absolutely a delight. So if you ever get to hear Josie talk about his story, go see him. And then we just talked about other community resources for people with brain injury. So that is what I have. Hopefully you learned a tidbit or two that can help you on your journey, whether you decide to join a support group or not. But you are all very inspiring people, and thank you for letting me be here today.
Rather than introducing myself, other than I'm Mike, here I am, I write the what do they call that? Here and now in Mind Matters. Thank you. I write that, and I have since 98 or 99. It's been a while, longer than I can remember. You know, I almost wasn't here today. It's cool, Dave, I'm here. Last week, every weekend, I get together with some friends and we play games. And last weekend I said, I won't be there next weekend because I've got this conference I'm speaking at. Cool. Through the week, I'm working on my presentation and stuff, and about Thursday I went, I haven't heard anyone talk about what we're going to do this weekend. So I emailed a friend, said, hey, you coming over this Saturday afternoon? And he goes, aren't you speechifying? And I went, yes. Yeah, I can't make that, dude. I'm going to be somewhere doing something. So, My accident happened in 1989. That's over 30 years ago. I'm 59, almost 60. In brief, I was leaving work and I got hit by a semi-truck.
I'm just gonna adjust this to make it louder. Sorry, Mike.
There, how's that? Okay, so then, I was at Regions, back when it was Ramsey, and I was in a coma for about 8 days, and I was in a hospital for a couple months, and doing outpatient rehab for a couple years. I don't remember how long, it was a while. And I've learned in the past 30 plus years, there's essentially 3 shifts or steps that you take. And the first one, of course, after your brain injury, is rehab. And I'm not going to break down to all those steps that Stephanie did so well, but get rehab and trying to get back whatever I could get back from who I was before my accident. And that took 3 to 5 years. And at that point, I kind of said, okay, I got to quit looking back and trying to be what I was. And I'm going to start looking ahead and saying, okay, this is what I got. Because when it first happens, you lose your identity. I don't know who I am. I'm trying to get back, because I'm trying to get back to that guy I knew. And eventually you go, okay, that's not going to happen. Who am I going to be now? So then I made the shift from trying to get everything back to what can I build with what I have. And essentially, with my brain injury, I got old in an instant. I woke up and everything hurt, and I couldn't move, I couldn't balance, I couldn't speak. I had to learn to read, write, walk, talk, tie my shoes, all that kind of stuff. And then I spent a lifetime getting younger. Like a kid growing up, every day I was getting faster and stronger and better and sharper. And that's kind of how that was my life. And I did learn to do many different things. And I found out somewhere in my mid-50s that I was getting old. And I had to stop focusing on growing, all this stuff on growing so much, and working on retaining, on keeping what I had already stored up. In my early 50s, I kind of, at my high point of all my abilities and stuff, 51, when 2014, yeah, 51, I graduated with my English degree. And a couple of years ago, I was asked by a friend that worked for the Danish Brain Injury Alliance if I would, she wrote a book on brain injury called Sex, Love, and the Broken Brain. And I go, wow, that's a huge topic. This really needs to be talked about. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this happen. And she goes, well, it's already in like 5 languages, but we don't have it in English. And I said, oh, I'll translate it. And I don't actually speak Danish, but I have a pretty good working knowledge of Germanic language structure. I'm kind of into that. And so I started out using Google Translate and you do Google Translate over a paragraph, and it gives you this gobbledygook that doesn't really. For one thing, if it was very basic stuff, I walk to the store, it'll do that for you. But when you start talking about relationships and sexuality, and there's all sorts of inside words and terms used for that, you get some really hilarious definitions coming out, especially when it's Danish. They're trained. It's just weird. So I'd call up. Her name is Susan. I'd call up Susan or email her and say, what was I fell in the sink? And she goes, oh, that means I was upset about it. And I went, okay, good enough, good to know. So I worked through, I got that all done. And that's coming out later this year, early next year. Lash Publishing is putting that out. And for those of you who might be thinking about writing a book or have written books, being an author is a real pain in the butt, because you write the book, then the publisher comes back with their edits, and you go through it, and you feel like you're writing it all over again. And they want you to read it again. How do you like this version? And working as a translator, it's awesome. You translate it and say, there, done. Thank you. I'm going to do much more than that if I get. Well, I'm going to do it. This book is so important. I'm going to do whatever I can do to get it out there. But about that time, that's when I was really pushing myself, and I started noticing that I had this fatigue that was magnifying my deficits with brain injury. And as you get older, everyone, no surprise, as you get older, you get tired quicker. You get worn out quicker. And this just gets magnified with brain injury. And so I found myself, things that I thought I could do, very much like when you first get a brain injury. You think you can do something, you don't know what you can't do till you try it and you fail at it. I'm learning once again that, I can't do that. I can't. The last time I drove somewhere in a storm at night, I had to pull over and went, I can't do this anymore. I can't drive. I stopped driving at night. I used to drive at night before, and not downtown or anything, but I could drive at night and get around. But in the last 5 years, I've just stopped driving at night because my brain injury stuff I can deal with, but my eyes are getting old. I get to intersections and I can't see. If I can see things, I have a tough time. When I can't even see stuff and figure it out, the driving gets really tough. So I've made that was like the first clue that, hey, you're getting old. And it was kind of a shift for me, because younger, better, faster, stronger, all the way along, and all of a sudden, I'm getting old now. With that fatigue comes, once again, I'm experiencing what it is to be frustrated when I can't do what I could do. Things that I distinctly remember working very hard to learn how to do and to be able to do again, and now I can't do them. Or I'm seeing the end of it coming. I'm going, I can't do this much longer. This is much harder. And it's not a thing where I just got to work at it and get better at it. It's tough. I find myself more than before getting confused. Since my fatigue strikes me earlier in the day, I start getting confused by things earlier in the day. I'm starting to, things frustrate me, and the only way I found to deal with this is to acknowledge that I'm tired, I'm getting frustrated. And instead of getting angry with it, which is your first reaction, I just say, no, I'm tired, this isn't working anymore. I gotta back off. I've now created my little safe space up in my den. Turn the lights off, sit in this comfy chair, put it back to just the right setting, and I'll sit there in quiet. And I never really had to do that before. Maybe I should have, but now I had to. I would just there'd be too much going on. Even if I'm just with my friends for a couple hours, that's all I can handle. And then I can't do it anymore. I can't follow what they're saying. I can't focus on what's going on. And I'll say, I gotta take a time out. I go up to my little space, soft lights, kick back in my chair, no sound at all. And I just breathe deeply. And I've been into yoga for years, and I mean, I can do the deep breathing meditation thing. And I just do that till I start feeling 15, 20 minutes, till I start feeling squirrely. And then I know I'm good to go, and I get up. And I go back down and rejoin people if they're still there. And I reconnect with whatever I had going on. But I'm finding that I need to do that. I probably should have done it before, but now I need to do it. Or I just can't function in my day. I used to go out with friends like, let's all go out to dinner. 4, 5, 6, 7 people all go out for dinner, hang out. And I used to do that, and I'd be tired when I got back, and it's just the way it is. And even get back at 7, and I'm tired, and it's like, oh, that was a lot. But now, the last couple times I did it, it didn't work. I didn't want to be there. Even though those are my good friends I haven't seen in a while, I did not want to be there. And all I could think about was getting home and sitting in my chair. And so now I very rarely will go out at night with friends unless it's 1 or 2 people. I have a fairly wide circle of friends that all went to high school and college together back in the 80s. They're always doing things. The same group I play games with on Saturday afternoons. And I said, let's get together and go out here and do this. And I'm like, and they're like, well, we'll drive. We'll bring you along. And I'm like, no, because I'm going to want to leave, and I don't want you to have to leave early because I want to leave early, and it's a whole big deal. So, and I've realized now that many of these things are the same sort of things that my grandparents, I was very close to my grandparents, that my grandparents went through when it was time for them to go to the nursing home. They were very good about it. They said, you're right, this house is too much work. They mowed 3 acres. They go, it's too much work to keep track of. Let's just sell the house. It's time. And they were in their 90s by then. So, and I always wanted to go, what's it going to be like for me when I get there? And I'm not there yet by any means. But now I can see it. I can see getting confused with things. I got married a few months after my after my accident, and my wife has been with me every step of the way, and she's kept the house running and all this stuff going. And for a while, in my 40s, I thought, wow, if something happened, if I had to be on my own again, I'm not sure I could pull this off. I don't think I could keep a household together. It takes a major adjustment to keep track of anything. But now, once again, I'm going, no, I could not live by myself independently. I mean, it would be, if I tried, it would be fraught. Things would be happening. I'd be missing, I got to pay that bill again? Every month? But, and it's, so I'm going, so what, when the next steps happen, eventually it's going to get to the point that my wife and I are going to have to say, hopefully it's my wife and I together that decide we have to move to a nursing home because she can't keep track of everything and me at the same time. What I get afraid of with what I really fear with that is I don't want to disappear. And disappear, I mean, when you're still there, your body is still there, but you can't be present anymore. And that's kind of what happens when I'm out with my friends and I get too tired. I start to disappear. They're talking and I can't follow them, and I'm just tuning out. And I don't want to disappear. I don't want to disappear permanently. So of course, when faced with things like this, I'm going, well, what can I do? And no one really knows. Aging brain injuries are kind of new. You know, you got to stay active mentally and physically. That's a given. And staying physically active is pretty, you got your thing down that you got to do, and you got to do that, and as much as you can. But staying mentally active is a little more opaque, because physically active, you can tell you're working on things, you're trying to get, how far can I walk, how tired do I get, da 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 da. And we've all, I'm going to be real positive here, we've all gotten into shape before. And you walk, you start, say you're just walking, you start walking, pretty soon you can walk a little farther and a little farther, that's how it works. I don't see that working with mental clarity and stuff. I use my brain on things and I get tired. And I can't get less tired if I keep doing this every day. It's like, no, I haven't been able to change that. The only thing that I think would work at all, they're going, okay, I want a young brain again. How do I get a young brain? Well, you mimic, for me, I'm going, well, I'll need to mimic a young brain. This is where, a little side story about me you need to know. When I wanted to, I thought I spoke well after my brain injury. I didn't realize I had a really nasty speech impediment, and it was hard to understand me. And when I saw myself in a video for the first time, it was like my birthday 2 or 3 years afterwards, and I heard myself speaking, I was mortified. I can't believe I sound like that. And it became imperative to me to fix that. And the way I fixed it, I remembered in high school when I studied German, how good it felt to get out of German class, to be able to speak English again and be able to pronounce the words and say the words, and that's what I want again. So I'll study German again. So I started studying German again. And it worked good for a little while, but eventually my German, it came back to me and it got pretty good. I read The Hobbit in German, and but it wasn't getting the purpose. The purpose was I wanted to stop, when I stopped studying it, have it be easy, have English seem easy. So I started learning Finnish, and Finnish never got easy. I spent 4 years, wherever I went, I had Finnish tapes going. I'd be repeating the Finnish tapes, and it never got easy. Well, it got easier, but it always felt good to stop and just speak English and I knew what I was saying. So I mimicked that previous learning experience. So I'm thinking that the way to keep your brain, keep a young brain, is to learn new things. Because at least when you start out learning new things, that's kind of fun. It's kind of cool seeing what's going down. So I've recently started editing videos, and it's fun. I can only do it for a few 20, 30 minutes at a time on a daily basis. But I'm learning new things and doing new things, and if I get tired and frustrated, I stop. And I believe that has to be helping. But there's, like I said, there aren't a lot of studies out. I don't know. Probably the best thing it does for me is it makes me feel like I'm doing something. That I'm just not waiting, trying not to get old. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Did it surprise you for all this to happen so young? When you were thinking this is all going to become happening in our 70s and 80s like our grandparents?
Yes. Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I call it my accelerated senescence because I feel I'm getting older faster. It's, you know, I know when I would tell people with my brain injury, I have a bad memory. Well, everybody has a bad memory. You're not alone. You know, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, I must have a brain injury, I've got a bad memory too. Nobody has a good memory.
Or it's just part of getting older?
Yep. So when I say I'm getting old, but I'm getting old faster than you. It's like it's a competition or something. I don't know. It seems, you know, everyone I've ever spoken to is surprised by how old they're getting, and things like. I like to disc golf. That's my physical activity, and I was disc golfing with a couple of 20-year-olds, and they were talking about getting up late for work and how they just like jumped out of bed and ran downstairs and all this stuff to get to work. And I'm going, I would kill myself if I jumped out of bed. I go, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I go, I hurt. The first thing I have to do is, and I do yoga. The first thing I do is sit in bed and stretch everything out, and you know, and if I stand up right away, I'll fall right over. I go, it's just the way it works. He looked at me and he goes, my dad said that. He said it hurts to get up. I can't even imagine that. It just hurts. So, yes. Any other questions?
What would you tell your younger self about your life now? Like when you first had a brain injury, of course, we're the same age, but I couldn't predict what life would have been, you know, in my 50s or beyond. But if you kind of hope that if somebody could give me some insight, and then maybe would there be something that we would have done different in our early brain injury years to maybe mitigate the negatives that we're experiencing now?
You know, it's. I often tell people, I've been a contributor to the newsletter for all these years, and I've compiled those, and I have 3 books out. And I always tell people when I'm on the sell your book circuit that this book is what I would hand myself. This is the notebook I would hand myself right after my brain injury. Is take this, and what would I've given to have got a book of observations from my future self after I had a brain injury. I don't know what I tell my future self about getting old. Old is not for weak people. And this is actually very hard for me to do, to talk about this, because my normal mode of speech is, I can do this, I can overcome this. They talk about acceptance of your brain injury, and I took it one further. I took responsibility for my brain injury. I say, my brain injury was my fault. Somewhere up there in heaven, they said, one of you people is going to get a brain injury of all the people I love and care for in my family. And I said, that'd be me. I got this. I can do this. Don't make this happen to anybody else. And then telling myself that I chose this, and I said I could do this, is very empowering to me as a person. Like, I can handle this. And so if I was going to say anything to my younger self, I'd say, hey, you got this. You can do this. And marry Linda and never let her go because she's the best thing that ever happened to you. So that's it. Anything else? Yes?
I was just wondering, you said something about being younger, now you're in your mature years.
Yeah.
You don't think that your younger self would be able to handle that brain injury you had now? Or that?
He would. Because he did. They talk about denial. Stephanie talked about denial and acceptance, and that really is so true. And the way I wrote one of my recent articles was called Note to Self, and in that note to self, I talked to myself before my brain injury, and I said, "You had all this going on," and it was kind of an angry letter, and it said, "And then this happened. I don't want to be you anymore." So basically, the gist of the article is, I don't want to be you anymore, because that accident happened and you died. You laid down and died, and I got up and I carried on. Nothing was easy. Everything came hard. So you go back and lay down. I got this. And it just to me, that was just it was very cathartic, powerful observation to say, look, you know, the whole thing about, I used to be this, I used to be that, no, I don't want it. I know that guy, he couldn't have done what I've done. And that helps me accept what's happened to me. Anything else?
I came today because I'm having issues now 12 years later.
Yes.
My accident happened before, like I was 45, and I'm 57 now. And just within like the past 6 months, I can't fake it anymore.
That's a good description of it. Yeah.
I was cruising along really well, doing well, and everybody's proud of me, and you know, you're doing well, you're enjoying it. And now I've had to face the fact again, the reality that something's happened here again.
Yep.
And
You
I-
feel like you're getting cheated again, don't you?
Yeah, and here we go again, so it's time to reevaluate and set the ship sails a little different, figure out what path I need to go so I can get back to enjoying things. But it's a struggle because it started affecting my relationships
Yeah.
and my self-esteem, the whole thing. So it's been really good to be here today. Again, I know the importance of support groups, so it was really good to hear that. But I came for your message, and I heard exactly what I'm facing too. And so thank you.
Thank you for saying that. I'm not alone.
No.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.